Lesson 38 is using properties of equality to solve equations. And that's a whole bunch of fancy words to say that we have opposites in mathematical operations. So we have the operations, addition and subtraction, and then multiplication and division. These two are opposites. And these two are opposites. And what it means is that basically if I have 5 and then I add it on 2, then to undo that I can subtract 2. These two cancel out and I'm just left with 5. The same thing would be true if I do 5 times 2 divided by 2. 5 times 2 is 10 divided by 2, and I get 5 back. So those two undo each other. So let's get started. Number 1 says it is 4:35 p.m. and dinner is at 5 p.m. If each task takes 5 minutes to complete, how many tasks can be completed before dinner? So the first thing that we need to know is how much time is before dinner. So from 4:35 p.m. to 5 p.m. is 25 minutes. So we have 25 minutes. Each task takes 5 minutes. Which means we can do 5 tasks. The ratio of whole milk bottles to skim milk bottles, so we have whole and skim, at the dairy was 3 to 7. If there were 212 skim, so line that up with the other skim, 210 skim bottles of milk, how many whole bottles were there? So this one's easy enough that if I go, okay, how do I go from 7 to 210? Well, first I'll say, okay, how do I go from 7 to 21? That would be times 3, and then I just add a 0, so it must be times 30. So then we multiply by 30 here. 3 times 30 is 90. Printed on the label of a 1-gallon milk bottle was 3.78 liters. How many milliliters is 3.78 liters? Well, one thing that you need to know is that there are 1,000 milliliters in 1 liter. So then we can say, all right, I have 3.78 liters. And then liters must go on the bottom, so it cancels with this liters. And when I multiply by 1,000, I move the decimal point 1 place for each 0 I have. So I have 3 zeros. I move the decimal place to the right when I'm multiplying by that. So 1, 2, 3 places. So that means that my final answer is 3,780. Which is more, a liter of milk or a quart of milk? Well, the word quart kind of looks like quarter, and that means that there are 4 quarts in 1 gallon. And we also know that 3.78 liters equals 1 gallon. So it wants to know which one is more. Well, liters must be bigger than a quart because it doesn't take as many liters as to make a gallon as it does quarts. I mean, if you think about it, 50 and 100. 100 is bigger. And if you compare them, we know that 2 100s go into 200 and 4 50s go into 200. 100 is bigger because it doesn't take as much to go into 200 as it does for 50s. Bob drives 28 miles every half hour. If he drives for 2.5 hours, how far does he drive? So we know that 28 miles times 2 is going to give us how far he drives in 1 hour. That's 56 miles per hour. He drives for 2.5 hours, which means he drives 56 for the first hour, 56 for the second hour, and 28 for the last half hour. $56 and 56 is 112, and then 28 is 140. Wait. 56 and 56 is 112. Yeah, 140. Got myself confused. All right. Solve problems 5 through 8 using inverse operations. So inverse operations means opposites. So addition and subtraction go together, and then multiplication and division go together. And remember that division can be a fraction. So, in number 5, we have x minus 2.9. So right now, what we always want to do to solve an equation is get the variable all by itself. So right now on the same side of x is this 2.9. And 2.9 right now is being subtracted. So we need to do the opposite of that, which is add. So we take and we add 2.9 to each side. Minus 2.9 plus 2.9 cancels out. That would be 0. So x plus 0 is x. And then 4.2, 1. And 2.9 is 7.11. Number 6, we have 2/3 plus x equals 5/6. So right now, the 2/3 is being added on to x. So the opposite of adding is subtracting. So we're going to have plus 2/3 minus 2/3. That will cancel it out, and then we would have plus x. And so we have 5/6 minus 2/3. And we pretend like this is just one of the regular problems they give us where they ask us to subtract two fractions. We need a common denominator. I can write 2/3 as something over 6. To go from 3 to 6, I multiply by 2. So it can be 4/6. Then we have 5/6 minus 4/6. 5 minus 4 is 1. 6 stays the same, and that is x. 3/5 x equals 6/7. So when we put a number right next to x like this, what's being done is it's being multiplied. So what we need to do then is we need to divide, because that's the opposite of multiplication. So I could take 3/5 x divided by 3/5, and then 6/7 divided by 3/5. And if you think about it, if you take any number, let's say it's 4, and you divide it by itself, you get 1. Any number that I do that with, I get 1. So what's happening here is this cancels out, and I just get 1x, which I write as x. When I divide by a fraction, that's the same thing as multiplying by its reciprocal. So I have 6/7 times the reciprocal of 3/5 is 5/3. 6 times 5 is 30. 7 times 3 is 21. Both of those have a factor of 3 in them. 10/7, which then could be 1 3/7. X over 2.2 means x divided by 2.2 equals 11. So if it's being divided by right now, then I can multiply it. That'll cancel out and give me 1. Two times 2 is 2, 2 times 2 is 2, 2 times 2 is 2, 2 times 2 is 2. Ignored 1 decimal point. So x equals 24.2. To solve this proportion, we can look and say, okay, to go from 21 to 7 this direction, I divide by 3. So then I have to take 30 and divide by 3 to get to x. 30 divided by 3 is 10. Find the area and perimeter of a triangle with vertices at -4, 1. So to the left 4, up 1. 2, 1, to the right 2, up 1. And 2, -7. So if I want to find the area, what I need to do is find the lengths of the two legs. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 here. So to find the area, the formula is 1/2 the base times the height. Half of 6 is 3. 3 times 8 is 24. Don't know what the units are, so we just call them units. And since it's area, it's squared. And then the perimeter, we're going to need to know what the hypotenuse is. So one thing that you could recognize is that this is a 3, 4, 5 triangle. 6 is 2 times 3, 8 is 2 times 4, and then this side must be 10, because that would be 2 times 5. The other way that you could do it is the Pythagorean theorem. 6 squared is 36, 8 squared is 64, So we could go through and do that. So then we add up all of the sides. 6 plus 8 is 14, plus 10 is 24. And then perimeter has just units, plain. Evaluate. Find the area and perimeter of the figure below. So we need to divide this into shapes that we know how to find the area of. So the first shape that we know how to find the area of is of a rectangle. And this rectangle's dimensions are 10 by 12. The 15 applies to the entire length across the bottom. And then the other shape that we're going to use is this triangle. And since the blue length here is 10 and the entire width across is 15, that means that the red length must be 5. And the height of that triangle is 12, since it has the same length as, or height as the rectangle. And we're also going to need to figure out what this side here is. And to do that, we'll use the Pythagorean theorem. So we will have 5 squared plus 12 squared is question mark squared, or c squared. 5 squared is 25. 12 squared is 144. That's 169. And the square root of 169, that's one you should just know, is 13. So this is 13 here. So now we can go through and find the area and the perimeter. So to find the area of the rectangle, we would do 10 times 12. And that's 120. And it says the dimensions are in feet, so that would be feet squared. To find the area of the triangle, it's 1/2 the base times the height. 5 times 12 is 60, and half of that is 30. So then to find the total area, I would add those two pieces together. And then to find the perimeter, we just add up all the sides around the outside. So 12 plus 10 plus 13 plus 15. 12 and 13 is 15, plus 15 is 30, plus 10 is 40. We expand, that means to distribute that negative 4x throughout. So negative 4x gets multiplied by 2x. And then it gets multiplied by 9. And when I multiply things like this, the first thing I do is multiply the numbers. So negative 4 times 2. 4 times 2 is 8. And since they're opposite signs, one's positive, one's negative, my answer is negative. And then I take and I multiply the variables. X times x gives me x squared. Then, again, I would multiply the numbers first here. So I have negative 4 and 9. 4 times 9 is 36. And since they're opposite signs, my answer is negative. And there aren't any other variables than the x, so that would stay that way. And subtracting a negative is the same thing as adding its opposite, and the opposite of negative 36 is positive 36. So we would write this as negative 8x squared plus the opposite of 36x, which is negative 36x, which is positive 36x. Now to factor, we look and say, what do these two terms have in common as factors? And they both have a 3. So I could write 3x as 3 times x, and I could write 3 as 3 times 1. Now this is going to go in the place of where that negative 4x was outside the parentheses before. So I'm going to have a 3 outside, and then inside the parentheses is what's left, x plus 1. And you can distribute that back through, and you still should get 3x plus 3. Write 32% as a decimal and a reduced fraction. So 32% as a decimal means that I'm going to take the decimal point, move it 2 places to the left. So as a decimal, it's 0.32. And as a fraction, 32% means 32 out of 100. Both of those have a factor of 4 in them that I can take out. So as a reduced fraction, it would be 8/25. Simplify, I'm going to use order of operations here. So I do the inside parentheses first, and then inside those, exponents come first. So I'm going to say that 8 squared is 64, and 4 squared is 16. And then inside the parentheses, I would do the multiplication. So I have 4 times 16. And 4 times 16 is 64. 16 plus 16 is 32, and 32 and 32 is 64. And then I finish up what's inside the parentheses, which is 64 minus 64, which is 0. And 3 times 0 is 0. That's the next step. After parentheses would be exponents, but there aren't any more. So I do multiplication and division next. This is the multiplication first. So I get 26 plus 0, and then I do the addition to get 26. In number 15, I do the exponent first, because there's nothing to do inside the parentheses. So I have 0.5 squared, and that would mean 0.5 times 0.5. So I ignore the decimals, and I just say 5 times 5 is 25. And I ignored 2 decimals, so I moved that decimal point. So that's going to be 0.25. So this will be 21 minus 20 times 0.25. And I know that 0.25 is 1/4, so I could actually rewrite that just to help my mental math here. And when I multiply by 1/4, what I'm actually doing is dividing by 4. 20 divided by 4 is 5. And then 21 minus 5 is 16. In a problem like number 16, we go through and first we're going to divide just the numbers. So I'm going to say what is negative 48 divided by negative 8. When you're doing multiplication and division with integers, you ignore the sign. So 48 divided by 8 is 6. And these have the same sign, and the same sign means that my answer will be positive. So my final one's going to have a 6 here. The next thing that I do once I've taken care of my numbers is I look and I say, oh, both of these have x. X on top divided by x on the bottom. Those two will cancel out. So I'm left with 6m. If I'm going to divide by a fraction, it needs to be an improper fraction. I can't have a mixed number like I do in number 17. So to do that, I multiply 1 by 7 and get 7. And then I add it to 5 and I get 12. So this is now 2/5 minus 4/7 divided by 12/7. When I divide by a fraction, it's the same thing as multiplying by its reciprocal. Division comes before subtraction by order of operations. So I have 4/7 times the reciprocal of 12/7, which is 7/12. When we have the same number diagonal like this, they cancel out. So I get 2/5 minus 4/12 12ths. Those become 1s. And 4/12ths I can take and divide each of those by 4. Which gives me 1/3. And now to subtract those fractions, I need to find a common denominator. I can write 2/5 as something over 15. To go from 5 to 15, I multiply by 3. So to go from 2, I multiply by 3 to get 6/15. I'm going to write 1/3 as something over 15. I multiply by 5. 1 times 5 is 5. So 5/15. So 2/5 minus 1/3 turns into 6/15 minus 5/15. And that gives us 6 minus 5 is 1/15. 1/9 plus 4/6 times 4/12. The multiplication comes before the addition. So I'm going to multiply straight across here. Keep the 1/9 that I haven't done anything with. 4 times 4 is 16. 6 times 12 is 72. And I believe that I can pull a 16 in. So divided by 16. Because 16, oh no, I can't divide by 16. So let's try dividing by 8. 16 divided by 8 is 2. And 72 divided by 8 is 9. So then we have 1/9 plus 2/9. 1 plus 2 is 3/9. Both of those are divisible by 3. So our final answer is 1/3. And then in 19, we can write out what this actually means. So on top we have x times x times x times x times x 5 times over x times x is x squared times that extra x. And then in the second fraction we have 1, 2, whoops, that looks like a G, sorry, 3, 4 y's over 1y. These will cancel. And one of these will cancel. So that leaves us with x squared. X times x is x squared. And then we have 1, 2, 3 y's. Y cubed. Combine like terms. So we need to look and see that the letters are all the same. The order of the letters doesn't matter. But the letters all need to be the same, and they need to have the same exponents. So if you look at these first 3 terms here, they all have x, y, z, and each of those letters only has an exponent of 1. This one here has x, y, z, but it has an exponent of 2 on the x that the other ones don't have. So these first 3 terms here are like terms, and I have x, y, z plus essentially x, y, z, and then minus xyz. And we know that addition and subtraction are opposites. They cancel each other out and get 0. So if I'm adding on and then subtracting, this is going to turn into 0. So that leaves me with xyz, and then that last term minus x squared yz. In 21, we have to look for the same variables. So we have gh and 4gh. So we have 1gh minus 4gh. 1 minus 4 gives us negative 3gh. And then we have nothing else other than 7g that has just a g. And then we have minus 8h plus 1h. Minus 8 plus 1 gives me minus 7h. And when I add a negative, that's the same thing as subtracting. So I can actually just write that as minus 7h. The triangles are similar. Find x and y. So if we're looking at this, we have two triangles here, and the fact that they're similar means that they are proportional. So to go from one triangle's length to the corresponding length on the other triangle, there must be a factor that we multiply by. So to go from 20 to 40, these two sides are corresponding. I multiply by 2. That has to be true for all other side lengths. So we find another set of corresponding side lengths, 12 and x. 12 times 2 has to give us x because the factor between the two is 2. 12 times 2 is 24, so x must be 24. And then another set of corresponding side lengths is 44. To go from y to get to 44, you must multiply by 2. So what number times 2 gives you 44? So y must be 22. For problems 23 and 24, find all values of x which make the equations true. So x squared equals 100. What number times itself gives us 100? Well, that can be x, or excuse me, 10. But if I take negative 10 times negative 10, that's also going to give me 100 because 10 times 10 is 100. And they have the same sign, so my answer is positive. So it's either positive 10 or negative 10. In 24, we have 3 plus the absolute value of x equals 9. So this right here, the absolute value of x, has to be 6 because 3 plus 6 would give us 9. So what numbers have the absolute value of 6? Well, x could be 6, which is 6 away from 0, or negative 6, which is also 6 away from 0. There are 12 sheep in the field. Eduardo notices that there are more goats in the field than there are sheep. Which of the following is a possible ratio of sheep to goats? All right, so we have sheep to goats. And he notices that there are more goats and less sheep. So when we look at these numbers, we know that the bottom number has to be bigger than the top number. So that is not true in A. They're equal in B, and it's not true in C. So the only one where the bottom number, meaning the one that represents the goats, is bigger than the top number representing the sheep, is D. A strain of bacteria doubles every minute. Beginning with 1 bacteria, how many would there be after 12 minutes? So we have 1 bacteria to start with. So this is start. Then after 1 minute, you would have 1 times 2 is 2 bacterias. After 2 minutes, you would have 2 times 2 is 4. And then 3, you'd have 8. 4, you'd have 16. 5, you'd have 32. 6, you'd have 64. 7, you'd have 128. 8, you'd have 256. 9, you'd have 512. 10, you'd have 1024. 11, you'd have 2048. And then 12, you'd have 4000 96. So we've multiplied by 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 times. So it says write an equation using exponents and powers of 2. So we would have the bacteria equals 2 to the 12th, which is 4,096. On a number line, graph the integers that are greater than 3 and less than 3. So we draw our number line out. And here's 0. So if I want the integers that are greater than 3, that would be 4, 5, 6, and so on. And the ones that are less than -3 would be -4, -5, -6, and so on. Dharma has a bag that contains 6 pens. 3 are black, 2 are blue, and 1 is red. If Dharma takes 1 pen out of the bag without looking, what is the probability of selecting a blue pen? Well, there are 2 blue out of 6 total, which would give us 1/3 if we reduce it. What is the complement of selecting a blue pen? Complement means the opposite. So it would be not a blue pen, which is 2/3. The opposite of 1/3 when we're talking about probability is what would add to be 1. 1/3 and 2/3 gives us 1. Use 3.14 for pi to find 2.2 pi r when r is 5. So 2 times 3.14 gives us 6.28. And then times r, which is 5. So if I have 6.28 times 5, 8 times 5 is 40, 2 times 5 is 10, plus 4 is 14, and then 5 times 6 is 30, plus 1 is 31. We ignored 2 decimals, and that would give us 31.40. Another way that we could have done that is to recognize that when we write this out, if we rearrange these and say 2 times 5 times 3.14, and then 2 times 5 is 10 times 3.14, then we just move the decimal place 1 place over, and we get 31.4. And the last problem, refer to this figure to answer the following questions. Which angle is acute? Acute is less than 90 degrees. That's this angle right here. So we would name that as BOC. Which angle is obtuse? Obtuse means it's more than 90 degrees. That's this angle right here. Angle AOB. Which angle is straight? A straight angle is a straight line. So angle AOC. And then which 2 angles form a linear pair? Meaning if you go through one angle and then the next, you've turned around 1/4 of a turn. So if I go from here to there, that's angle AOB. And then if I go from that point down, that's angle BOC. So angle AOB and angle BOC.